Some days in court stay with me forever, and this was one of them. I've seen thousands of cases in my life, but this one shook me deeply. It wasn't only about money or power or a young man's mistake. It was about character. Comment. Was I too harsh? It was about whether privilege could walk into a courtroom and expect a bow, and it was about whether I still had the courage to do what was right. In my 40 years on the bench, I learned something simple. The law speaks to everyone in the same voice, rich or poor, connected or forgotten. But the truth is, people don't always enter the room believing that. Some come in humbled, some come in scared, some come in angry. Comment, what would you have done? And some come in thinking the courtroom is just another room they own. That morning I walked in carrying more than my robe. I carried my father's voice. My father, God rest his soul, worked hard every day. He taught me that respect is earned by how you treat the little people. He used to say, character is how you treat those who can't help you. Those words never left me. I said a little prayer before I sat down. I asked for wisdom, not applause. Comment, do you believe power changes people? Because here's the thing. A courtroom is not only a place of rules, it is a place of truth. Sometimes truth walks in quietly. Sometimes it storms through the doors wearing expensive shoes and a smug smile. That day it stormed in, and I knew, almost at once, that I was being tested too. Let me take you back. The courthouse in Providence was busy that morning. People filled the benches early. Clerks moved quickly. Papers shuffled. A cough here, a whisper there. The old clock on the wall ticked with that steady sound I've heard for decades. Usually that sound settles me, not that day. Comment, have you ever felt trouble enter a room? I remember the air feeling heavy before the case was even called. You know how sometimes a room changes before a storm. That's how it felt. My clerk looked toward the entrance. A court officer leaned slightly forward. Then the doors opened, and in walked a young man in a tailored navy suit, chin raised high, followed by a cluster of security men. Not one or two, 10. They moved like they were entering a campaign event, not a courtroom. People in the gallery turned their heads. I heard murmurs move across the room. Someone whispered the name of his father, the mayor. The young man did not look nervous. He looked annoyed to be there, annoyed that ordinary people were watching him, annoyed that the court had dared to call his name. Comment, should family power matter in court? He was charged with reckless driving, leaving the scene of a minor collision, and interfering with a traffic officer. On paper, those charges may not sound like the end of the world, but conduct matters. Context matters. When a young man barrels through a city street, clips another driver, refuses to stop, and then mocks the officer who pulls him over, that tells me something deeper. It tells me he believes rules are for other people. I looked at the file. I looked at him. Then I looked again. He was young, privileged, healthy, educated. Every advantage in life was sitting right there in front of me. And I thought about the men and women I'd seen stand where he stood, people who worked 2 jobs, people who borrowed bus fare, people who came in ashamed over one unpaid ticket. Comment, does entitlement bother you too? My first impression, I'll be honest with you. My gut tightened. I did not dislike him because of his name. I disliked what I saw in his face. It was the look of someone who had never truly heard the word no. And when you've sat on a bench as long as I have, you learn to read that look quickly. I greeted him the same way I greet everyone. Good morning, state your name. He said it like a man introducing himself at a country club, smooth, dry, bored. I asked if he understood the charges. He shrugged and said, my attorney handles that. That was the first spark. Comment, rude or just nervous. Then I asked about the officer's report. According to the report, when the officer stopped him, he said, do you know who my father is? The officer wrote that the young man also said, you people work for us. That sentence bothered me more than the traffic violation. You people. I grew up in this neighborhood. My father worked 2 jobs. My mother kept our family together with love and discipline. Nobody worked for us. We all worked for a living. I gave him a chance to explain. I always do. He leaned back, checked his phone, and smiled at one of the guards. Then he said, this whole thing is a joke. Comment, what would you think hearing that in court? The room got still, not movie still, real still, the kind where even paper stops moving. I asked him to put the phone away. He rolled his eyes. He actually rolled his eyes in my courtroom. Then he muttered, not quietly enough, "Unbelievable." My clerk asked for his paperwork. He slid it across the desk without even looking at her. "No thank you, no courtesy, no respect. If this touches you, please subscribe." And then came the moment I still remember clearly. The court officer tried to guide one of the guards away from the rail. The young man laughed and said, "He's with me, don't touch him." Not ask, not explain, command, like the courtroom belonged to him. Comment, was that the worst part so far? I felt heat rise in me. I'll tell you the truth, my hands didn't shake from fear. They shook from anger, controlled anger, the kind you must master if you wear a robe. I've seen good people struggle for less than this. I've seen mothers cry because they couldn't pay a fine. And here stood a young man with every advantage, acting like decency was beneath him. "If this touches you, please subscribe." I asked him directly, "Did you strike the other car and leave the scene?" He smirked and said, "If there was a scratch, I'm sure insurance can handle it." That answer told me almost everything. Not a word about the other driver, not a word about safety, not a word of remorse. Comment, is a lack of remorse the biggest red flag? Then I asked about the traffic officer. The report said he refused to hand over his license for several minutes. The young man said he should have recognized the vehicle and used common sense. Common sense, in other words, let me go, because I matter more. I've seen arrogance before, plenty of it. But arrogance is fear in a fancy suit. My father said people puff themselves up when there's emptiness inside. If this touches you, please subscribe. Still, that doesn't excuse harm. It doesn't excuse disrespect. It doesn't excuse using family power like a weapon. And what bothered me most was not his money, it was his contempt. Comment, do you agree contempt reveals character? 2 days earlier, I had a woman named Maria. I want you to hear this part because it matters. Maria came before me over parking tickets and a suspended registration. Nothing dramatic, no guards, no cameras, just a tired woman in a worn coat, holding a folder with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her together. Her voice shook when she spoke. "If this touches you, please subscribe." She cleaned offices at night and cared for her mother by day. One bus ran late, one payment was missed, then another. Life piled up the way life sometimes does. She looked me in the eye and said, "Your Honor, I made mistakes, but I never meant disrespect." Do you know what I saw in Maria? I saw responsibility. Comment, have you known someone like Maria? She had almost nothing, but she had dignity. She thanked the clerk. She apologized to the officer. She didn't blame the city, or the court, or the weather, or bad luck. She simply told the truth. And because I believed her, I worked with her, I reduced what I could, I gave her time, I wished her good luck, and I meant it. Mercy belongs where honesty lives. If this touches you, please subscribe. So when I looked back at this young man, that contrast sat heavy on my chest. Maria struggled and still showed respect. He had every door open for him and still chose contempt. That, to me, was the real case, not rich versus poor, character versus entitlement. Comment, is that the real difference? Now let me tell you something personal. Part of me wanted to show mercy anyway. Yes, even then, I've always believed that young people can change. I've always believed one bad day should not define a whole life. And I know what it means to come from a family name. A father's shadow can be heavy. If this touches you, please subscribe. But another part of me, the deeper part, knew I was not judging only a citation. I was judging conduct in that courtroom. I was judging the message my decision would send to every person watching. If I folded because his father was powerful, then what would the single mother in the back row think? What would Maria think? Comment, should judges consider the message sent? I couldn't sleep well that night before final disposition. I kept hearing my father's voice. He'd say, "Do right, even when the room gets cold." My wife, a wise woman, had said something similar over dinner once. She told me, "Compassion without backbone is only sentiment." She was right. Mercy matters, but so does spine. If this touches you, please subscribe. I remember standing by my kitchen window, looking out at the streetlights, asking myself a hard question. Was I angry at the young man, or was I angry at what he represented? I prayed for guidance, not punishment, guidance, because a judge must never sentence from ego. Comment: have you ever prayed before a hard decision? The next day, when the case resumed, the courtroom filled even earlier. Word had spread. Reporters lingered outside. Inside, that old clock kept ticking. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded louder than usual. The guards came again, though fewer this time. The young man came in with the same raised chin, but his smile looked thinner. I reviewed the evidence carefully. Dash camera footage placed his vehicle at the scene. The officer's testimony was consistent. The other driver described the impact and the refusal to stop. There was no great mystery left. If this touches you, please subscribe. The only real question was what lesson, if any, he was ready to learn. When I invited him to speak before ruling, he had one final chance. I hoped he would take it. I truly did. Instead, he said, "Let's not pretend this is about justice. This is politics." Comment: what would that tell you? There it was. No apology, no humility, no recognition of the people he'd dismissed. And in that moment, the conflict inside me ended. Clarity arrived quietly. Not because I wanted to make an example of him, not because it was easy, but because it was right. If this touches you, please subscribe. Everyone deserves respect, and everyone owes it. I looked him in the eye and said, "Young man, this court is not impressed by your last name, your suit, or the men standing behind you." The room went silent. I mean truly silent. Even the clock seemed to disappear for a second. Comment: should a judge say that plainly? I kept my voice calm, firm, steady. Then I said, "You are responsible for reckless driving, you are responsible for leaving the scene, and you are responsible for your conduct toward the officer in this court." I told him that privilege is not a shield, it is a duty. If this touches you, please subscribe. If life gives you more, then character should give more too. I imposed a substantial fine, not because I thought money would fix his soul, but because consequences must be felt. I suspended his license for a meaningful period because driving is a trust, not a birthright. Comment: fair penalties so far. I ordered community service in neighborhoods his family spoke about often but rarely walked through. Let him meet people who rise before dawn and earn every inch. And I required a formal written apology to the officer, the clerk, and the other driver. Some people laughed at that part afterward, but I did not. Words matter. Respect matters. If this touches you, please subscribe. I wanted him to sit with what he had done. I wanted him to name it. His face changed in stages. First disbelief, then offense, then anger. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered sharply. One of the guards shifted his weight like he expected the courtroom to bend for them. It did not. Comment: should anger change a sentence? The young man finally spoke up and said, "My father will hear about this." I answered him the only way I could. "I hope he does." A few people gasped. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth was enough. If this touches you, please subscribe. Because if a father holds public office, then he should know exactly how his son behaves when no one tells him no. There was protest, of course. The attorney objected to the scope of the penalties. The young man shook his head in disbelief. But I stood firm. In my 40 years on the bench, I have learned that wavering after truth only weakens justice. Comment: once decided, should judges hold firm? I wish them the same thing I wish many who leave my courtroom. Good luck to you. And I meant that too. Justice without hope is just noise. Now what happened after? The courthouse buzzed for days. Reporters called, people speculated. Some praised me, some said I had gone too far, some said I had not gone far enough. If this touches you, please subscribe. That is the burden of public duty. You will never satisfy every voice. I walked to my car that evening feeling strangely heavy, not triumphant, heavy. The air outside felt cooler than I expected. I sat behind the wheel for a moment and just breathed. Comment: have you ever done the right thing and still felt sad? I thought about the father. I thought about the son. I thought about how pride can ruin a family faster than hardship ever could. That night I told my wife everything. She listened the way wise people do, without rushing to fill silence. Then she asked me one question: did you act from anger or from conscience? I sat with that. And after a long pause, I said, "From conscience, I hope. If this touches you, please subscribe." She took my hand and said, "Then sleep." I wish I could tell you I did. I didn't, not right away. I kept replaying the scene, the smirk, the phone, the words, "You people work for us." Those words stayed with me because they insulted more than the court. They insulted every honest person who serves. Comment, do some words reveal everything? In the weeks that followed, I heard that the Father's office faced hard questions, not because of my ruling alone, but because the public now saw something they could not unsee. Entitlement has a way of pulling the curtain back. Power often survives mistakes. It rarely survives repeated contempt. And the Son, I heard through ordinary channels that he completed the service, slowly at first, bitterly at first. But something in him may have shifted. I hope it did. I truly hope it did. If this touches you, please subscribe. I do not want broken young men. I want awakened ones. Would I decide the same way again? Yes. With prayer, with care, with a heavy heart, yes. Not because I enjoyed it, not because it made headlines, but because the law must remain a place where money cannot buy decency and power cannot rent dignity. Comment, would you have ruled the same way? Here in Providence, I've seen saints in worn shoes and fools in polished ones. I've seen people with nothing act like royalty because they carried themselves with grace. And I've seen people with every advantage shrink into smallness because they never learned respect. That is why I say character is wealth. If this touches you, please subscribe. My father, God rest his soul, also said something else. He said, "The higher you climb, the kinder you should become." I believe that. Faith taught me that. Family taught me that. The bench confirmed it. The people who impress me most are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who say thank you, the ones who own mistakes, the ones who learn. Comment, is humility the real strength? So if you ask me what this case was really about, here's my answer. It was about whether a courtroom would bend. It did not. It was about whether a privileged young man would be treated as special. He was not. And it was about whether justice can still speak softly and stand tall at the same time. It can. To every young person listening, hear me clearly. Your name may open doors, but only character keeps them open. Your money may buy comfort, but it cannot buy honor. Your friends may cheer arrogance, but life eventually exposes it. If this touches you, please subscribe. And when that day comes, the truth will feel very lonely. To every parent listening, teach respect early. Don't only protect your children from consequences, teach them to deserve trust. Teach them to look a waiter in the eye. Teach them to thank the clerk, the officer, the cashier, the janitor. Comment, should parents teach respect more than success? Everyone deserves respect. Everyone owes it. And to those who feel small in this world, let me tell you something from my heart. Your dignity does not depend on money, title, or applause. It never did. I've seen thousands of cases, and some of the finest people I've ever met walked in with overdue bills and tired faces. Bless your heart if life has been heavy. If this touches you, please subscribe. I still think of Maria sometimes. I think of her steady honesty. I think of the young man too. One had struggle and gave respect. The other had comfort and withheld it. That was the lesson sitting side by side before me. Struggle does not always make people bitter. Sometimes it makes them noble. Comment, which person taught the bigger lesson? And arrogance? Let me leave you with this. Arrogance is fear in a fancy suit. It is weakness pretending to be strength. Real strength is calm. Real strength listens. Real strength says, I was wrong. That lesson took me a lifetime to understand, and I'm still learning it. So yes, that case stayed with me. It stayed in my mind when I walked to my car. It stayed at my dinner table. It stayed in my prayers. But in time, peace came. Not perfect peace. Honest peace. If this touches you, please subscribe. The kind that comes when you know you did not bend for comfort or fear. If this story means anything, let it mean this. Be humble. Be accountable. Don't confuse access with worth. Don't confuse noise with strength. And never speak down to people who serve, because service is honorable work. Comment, was the lesson worth the pain? I've said it before and I'll say it again. In the end, our lives are measured less by what we owned and more by how we treated people. That is true in court. That is true at home. That is true before God. If you believe that too, stay with me for more stories like this. If this touches you, please subscribe. And if you ever stand at a crossroads between pride and decency, choose decency. Choose it quickly. Choose it when nobody is clapping. Choose it when it costs you something, because that is where character is born. Comment and tell me, was I too harsh or not harsh enough? Good luck to you and God bless.